Draft or trade, trade or draft. He is going to tell you which one they ought to do for what might be, arguably at least, the biggest need for the Kansas City Chiefs in this draft cycle. We're going to get into it now. Welcome to RDR Football. Hey, we're back. How are you, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to this Football Chief in the North show with Seth Kaiser, the man, the myth, the legend. How are you, Seth?
I'm doing well. Now I'm nervous because that's quite an intro. Every time you do things like that, I'm like, no, me no speak good. just out of nowhere, it just goes terribly wrong. I'm actually panicking a little bit because I still have six whole receivers to look at for the draft. Well, I was hoping I'm looking at some edge rushers too, because I've actually, don't tell anyone, before finishing the wide receivers, I've looked just a tiny bit into some of the edge rushers, just a little bit. And there's a lot of people that a lot of people like, which isn't terrible. That's good news for the Chiefs.
It is good news.
Although I still struggle with my faith in their ability to identify and draft edge rushers.
Okay.
Maybe I'm wrong. I just, Brett Veach has done a lot of things well.
Mm-hmm.
Edge rushers has been an issue.
Yeah. Folks, that's what Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting is for. We'll tell you what to do there, Brett. Call me up. I'm telling you, I put a lot of work into this stuff.
That's true. Had he listened to you in previous years, he might be better off. I mean, it's just how it goes.
I mean, Josh Allen might be a Chief if he had listened to me a few years ago. I don't know. You're talking about trading for him. And folks, we are going to talk trades. We will get to some of your questions later. First half is Seth and my discussion about the topic of the day. I do want to shout out Chris Weeks. Yes, Chris, very good. There's some things going on in the homestead that are going to require me to take down the set. So it's down for a little bit, but it will be back whenever I have my new studio set up. So thank you for noticing. A lot of news for me before we get cutting tonight. Thank you all for all of your support. We have a couple new wrinkles for you, and I do want to share them because it's launched. NFL 33 is my newest venture. With some familiar voices and some new ones. It is all draft and team building. So it is not just draft season. It is year-long, and it is a familiar format for you because I know that you guys have all gone and checked out Seth's Substack. It is here at MinnesotaChiefsFans.substack.com. This is mine. It has nothing to do with the Chiefs in particular. See, right? I knew you were going to do that too. It is not, you need Seth's and you need ours. That's what it is, because this is overall team building. This is going to be draft all year long as we go through what is now, for me, a permanent year-long gig covering the draft. I will be live out of Dallas, Texas on all the streaming venues. You can watch it on any Locked On NFL channel, as well as Roku and a bunch of the streaming services if you have them in your area. So feel free. But all that, I got to do it year-round, so I got to keep up. So I'm going to tell you guys incrementally as we go along the way instead of compressing draft season into like what feels like less and less time for me every year. So that's there. If you guys would like to sub, I would appreciate it. There's the free level. There's the paid level. If you do get over there, please let me know. I am going to figure out a way to give you a coupon. Seth will probably help me figure that out because I haven't gotten that far on the platform yet, but we're going to get there.
Hey, get your own bit. Coupons are mine.
Okay, fine. Whatever
I'll
you
help
say.
you. It's super easy.
The other thing is the draft guide is still available. I think you guys should check that out. And if you do, make sure you get to rogueapc.com. Use that code RGR22.am. A lot of you have, but I do want to say it one more time. Don't feel guilty. Don't buy the guide for full price when I have a code for you, my loyal fans, our loyal viewership. Please use it and take advantage of it. It is there for you. So a lot going on there. And what you'll see on the new site is going to be some riffing. Like, you have our evaluations in the draft guide. That's straight up and down. What I would do, my preferences, my rankings, Dan's, EJ's, who you haven't met yet, but you will meet EJ, as well as the rest of my staff that's going to grow over there. You'll get all that kind of stuff draft related. So Draft is where that brings us to how you stack the wide receivers and what value is. And that's what you're talking about this week. So I know there's all this rumor about Debo. I'm guessing there's a lot of questions about Debo in the chat. And folks, we will get to your super chats no matter what. We will get to a bunch of your other questions. Can't guarantee all of them tonight because the Q&A is on Monday, but we'll try to get to them in the second half of the show tonight. But for you, Seth, is a known commodity now still more valuable to you, knowing that you, whether it's DK or whether it's Debo now, if you were to go acquire them, you got to go pay them as well?
Right. So the sissy answer, but the correct one is it depends, because every player is different. Debo is a better player on film than DK Metcalf. More varied.
Agreed.
And I'm not talking about his ability to like be a running back. Honestly,
right.
I can kind of see where he's coming from. And if he does get traded, whatever team he gets traded to, he's going to be like, don't use me like that. And I get why. I mean, he's not.
And they're going to say, we're going to use you like that.
Yeah. But it's like this matter of taking hits like that consistently. Mm-hmm. He's not wrong. That is not necessarily sustainable. But because he's so great as a running back or running back type role, he's actually a little underrated as a receiver. He runs very good routes, catches the ball well, and is obviously incredible after the catch. He's a threat at every level of the field. He doesn't get credit for that he should. Although, I mean, he's not an incredible deep threat, but he can do it. He can stretch the field a little. And because he's such an intense threat, like just so hard to deal with underneath, that makes you have to defend him a certain way, and it opens up downfield. So, I mean, Debo is an excellent wide receiver. Him and A.J. Brown, I think, are in this tier. And I think DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin are in this tier. Now, let me just be clear. These are still both tiers of really, really, really good players.
I'm with you.
But it changes the analysis a little bit because I think Debo and A.J. Brown are more elite players. McLaurin and DK Metcalf are very good players with elite ceilings. And there's a difference in analysis there because you just gave up an elite player. So here's the big thing. For one thing, I don't think the Chiefs are going to do it because I don't think you are going to get the type of deal that you need to do to make it make sense. If you're the Chiefs, it doesn't make sense to effectively swap Tyreek Hill for Debo or Tyreek Hill for A.J. Brown. Great players, both of them. Younger than Tyreek Hill. That matters. However, if someone had asked before all the craziness went down with Tyreek Hill, hey, would you trade Tyreek Hill straight up for Debo? Everyone would be like, no. The vast majority of Chiefs fans would say no. Hey, would you trade Tyreek Hill straight up for A.J. Brown? The vast majority of Chiefs fans would say no. And that's because Tyreek Hill is not only a better fit with what they currently do, he's a better player. The only player I would have even considered trading straight up for Tyreek Hill was Devontae Adams. And they're like 1A and 1B.
Yeah, they're 1 and 2.
Yeah, I mean, they are. And like Adams is just such a beast. Like you can kind of consider it, maybe, but you'd still probably hang on to Hill if you're the Chiefs.
Yeah.
So any move you consider making, and you don't want to think about sunk cost too much, but so what the Chiefs have done, and I wrote about this, like how could it make sense to trade for a top receiver? Like, is there a way that it could make sense? And here's what I would say. There's a lot of people, no, use the picks. I agree. By and large, what the Chiefs did when they traded Tyreek Hill is it looked like they had a plan to try to do that Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill window for 1 more year, maybe 2 more years. Now they have to pivot into a new plan, and they have a ton of picks and a lot more salary cap flexibility. Now, it's worth noting all that salary cap flexibility was because they already had a tiny amount. They had a little bit because of the way the salary cap works and because of the lack of players they have long-term under contract. With Tyreek Hill gone, it blows it up a lot more. But you use most of that up if you sign another player to an elite level deal. You use most of that up if you trade all the same assets just to get another guy. And that's why you have to view it as a swap. And you shouldn't think it in terms of, wow, okay, they're going to trade for, Debo Samuel for a first and a second rounder and sign him to a deal that's, I don't know, averages a cap hit of $22.8 million a year over the next 4 seasons. Wow, Seth, that's really specific. Why $22.8 million? Because that's what Tyreek Hill averages as a cap hit over the next 4 seasons. And then he's got that 5th year that is completely pretend. It's fictitious.
Right.
It's like $45 million.
Yeah, it's scary.
It's insane. And to be fair, after this year, Tyreek Hill's cap hits are like, 28 and 31, because this first year is like 6 or 7.
Right.
Which it was interesting to me that Miami did it that way because they had cap space to do it differently, but whatever, I guess. So the big thing there is it wouldn't be, oh, this is what we acquired Debo for. In the long run, what you did was you traded Debo for Tyreek Hill.
And
and you traded Tyreek Hill, I'm sorry, for Debo and a 4th rounder and 2 6th rounders. Would you have traded Tyreek Hill for Debo and a 4th rounder and 2 6th rounders? I wouldn't have.
Nope.
That's where the analysis changes. So what would it take for that deal to make sense? Probably the type of thing that teams won't be willing to do. You're more likely to get a deal like that, I think, one that maybe makes sense with a DK Metcalf or Terry McLaurin. I think you're more likely, because now let's say on the other hand, Washington is willing to part with McLaurin for 1 first-round pick. Then you would have to ask yourself this. Would you have traded Tyreek Hill for Terry McLaurin plus a 2nd-round pick, a 4th-round pick, and 2 6th-round picks?
Right.
That becomes more of a conversation. Especially if you sign a guy who, and this is the problem with getting Brown or Debo, in my opinion, those guys probably want to break the mark set by Adams and Hill if you traded for them this offseason. McLaurin, I think DK Metcalf probably would too, by the way. He gets a lot more hype.
He's just not justified.
No, and he's just a really, really good player. And that's the thing. And it's like kind of like when we talk about my wide receiver tiers that, I'm sure we'll talk about at some point tonight. Mm-hmm. Josh and Nate were giving me the hardest time when we're recording Times Ours because I had Christian Watson in tier 4. And I'm like, yeah, but that's of the 7 really good receivers that I'm looking at. That doesn't mean I think he's a 5th-round pick. It's that if they took him in the 3rd round, I'd be really happy. They took him in the 2nd round, I'd say, okay, I could see it. They took him in the 1st round, I'd say, that's a gamble.
Mistake.
It's a big gamble. And it could pay off. Christian Watson could be awesome. You can see the path there, but
he could be Demarcus Robinson.
It's a lot of protection.
We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. So anyway, that's the tiers of guys here that we're talking about. You have elite players and very good players, and there's a difference. And so I just, unless, Debo's issue with the Niners isn't the contract, but the Niners aren't going to trade Debo for anything probably than about the equivalent of what the Chiefs got for Hill. And that doesn't make sense. With AJ Brown. If you wanted
60, would you do 62 and maybe another, lower end pick? Because that's where I would start the conversation. That's the high end for me.
Right. And that's the thing. No one's going to trade Debo Samuel for that.
Right.
I mean, unless you think there's literally no way he's going to play for you this year. And even then, you kind of wait it out and see if he changes his mind, because that lack of accruing a full season, all that stuff, we saw that worked out for Le'Veon Bell. I just don't think, now running back's a different animal, but I just don't think that's players can do it. They've got more power than they used to, but it's still, they're still kind of had by the short hairs in some ways. So for me, the max that I would do it for would be like, if I say like a 1st rounder and change, when I say end change, I mean like a 7th round pick. I mean like change that's barely change.
Not rattling.
Yeah. And so I would just say the only way that makes sense for the Chiefs also is if they can kind of, and this is what I wrote about, if they could have their cake and eat it too, in terms of maybe just a little extra cap space. Let's say you can sign McLaurin to a deal because you're negotiating with his agent and you use Amari Cooper as a player comp as opposed to Tyreek Hill. Because if McLaurin said, well, I want Tyreek Hill money, that's a tough negotiation with the team. It's like, well, you ain't Tyreek Hill. Yeah, and McLaurin's a really good player. He's a stud. I think he's an excellent player whose best football is ahead of him, who may one day be talked about as that top 5 guy. But right now he's not.
Yep.
So if you can get that guy for, a $20 million a year cap hit, it's where you save, $3 million a year, and so in the meantime, you've gained $3 million a year in cap space and a second round pick and a couple of fourth rounders and a sixth rounder, and you still have a really high level player here. Then you can do it. Here's the problem. That's a fantasy.
That's a lot of ands in one scenario.
And that's where it becomes tough. Your best hope is that with the draft approaching, this is the time of year people love draft picks. I mean, love them. I had someone tell me on Twitter, no, just draft the next one. When I'd said, oh, that's interesting, in response to Debo wanting to trade. It's like, well, no, draft the next one. I'm like, I agree that it is a really good strategy to draft the next Debo Samuel. That's a great strategy. Yes. I can't argue with that. How is the...
Yeah. As soon as I know exactly who that is, I'm down with that plan.
Yeah.
That's... Oof.
You could make a heck of a career drafting star players.
Right? Hey.
That is by far... And that's why the reason people love the draft so much is if you get awesome results in the draft, that is by far the best way to build your team because it's awesome, cheap talent. It's just the draft is so, I mean, it's just completely random sometimes. Like once you pass like the third round, it's like, wow, we'll try.
Maybe.
Yeah, and you can
it's a whole lot of maybe.
Yeah, you can find some indicators. Sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes your scouting is just a little bit better. All those things can happen. So long road to a short thought. The Chiefs should keep their ear to the ground and see if there's some sort of steal available that they are in a little better position to absorb than other teams. One example for them, they are a team with an extra first, second, third, and fourth round pick. That gives you a lot to play around with. And in some ways, if they were going to trade away draft assets, depending on the amount, I would rather you do it for a guy who's a proven asset as opposed to a guess. And that's where it's tough. Like, imagine what they'd have to trade up to get to, like 13. It's like, oh, just trade up there to grab Drake London. Man, I like Drake London a lot. But if you're going to give up that kind of asset, maybe you're better off just paying the bigger contract for a guy is that dude. So that's kind of
Kansas City.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kansas City literally can't do that. So that takes them out of it, makes it a little less. So it brings me back to the draft prospects. We'll get to those in a second. Want to shout out Simon. Thank you for joining the memberships. If you are rookie or above, you get in the Discord. So give me a shout at rgrpodcast@gmail.com. Get you in there. Everybody shout out to our fearless mod. Aaron is in the house as well as Stevie Keys made it back.
Aaron, I owe you a DM, my friend.
And I owe you guys a video. I made a mistake and there was an issue with Aaron's video. Not his fault, mine. And I have had to recompile it, re-upload it, and get it back on the channel. It completed this afternoon, so I will have that for you guys tomorrow. Members, you will have that. It is the meetup with the Mod Father. You want to see that, I guarantee you. And again, that is my fault, not Aaron's. There's been a delay, and it's all on me. I've been a little preoccupied, and I hit the wrong button, and it did a bad thing. So that's the way that it came out. But the flip side of what we have been talking about is getting players in the other way, in making the investment, getting the young guys, trusting your eyes, trusting your research and your evaluations. Yep. That's the opposite side of the coin. That's where we got to go next. Colin, glad you made your first live. I'm glad to see you. Everybody, I see your super chats. We will get to them here after we finish our first half conversation here. And then second half is all you guys.
Says.
Well, yes.
He told Aaron he'd get that video up too.
I see how you are. That's great. It's nice when you work for yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, nice,
yeah. Whoops. Well, I'll demote myself. I'll demote myself to Master and Commander rather than Supreme Master and Commander.
Oh, well done. Well done. Yes. I like that. So long story short, in general, it is more of a risk in the draft, but I also feel that you can get to a place to make a selection for less investment of the draft capital than it is something like this Debo scenario or DK. So for me, it is about when do you identify somebody that you have to go target and then go do that. In your research so far, and you had a magic number, you have 6 days left to do 6 prospects, so well done. Is there somebody you would go trade up for?
I'd trade up for, always depending on cost, which you caveated, I would trade up for Jameson Williams, Drake London, or Chris Olave at the receiver spot.
All of them, huh?
Any one of those three. Any one of those three, I would want them to be reasonable. Probably not go up late teens, maybe. And even that's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
Because they have so much draft capital, they do have the ability to, let's say Garrett Wilson is taken early. Let's say Trey Burks is taken earlier than people think. And let's say there's 2 receivers taken and there's a run on edges that no one's expecting. And 2 or 3 quarterbacks go early. We want so many quarterbacks taken in the first 20 picks. We want like 6 quarterbacks taken. Might be more like 1 or 2. But someone always gets desperate. And Willis and Ritter and one other dude are going to go in the top 20. I'm predicting this.
Okay.
People get desperate, man.
Willis and Ritter.
Do you remember what it's like to not have a franchise quarterback on the team you cheer for and cover? It's horrible.
I cut that part out of my skull a few years ago. I'm not doing that again.
It's the worst. One of my greatest. Let me just say, and this is like we're talking probably 15 years in the future. When Patrick Mahomes retires, I'll probably retire because I won't be able to do it. That's my career end date. I don't even want to think about how old I'll be by then. Actually, by then I'll be like only a few years younger than you are now, and right? So it'd be
so great.
So it's terrible, and teams know how terrible that is, and you just know some team is out there talking themselves into 2 of these quarterback prospects, at least maybe 3.
Somebody's going to take Matt Corral too.
Oh, yeah. Let's say 4. Maybe 4. Let's go. Wouldn't that be great? That would be if you're a Chiefs fan, that's what you're rooting for. 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the top 20. Yes. And teams, trading back to do it, and hopefully trading back to a spot to where they can maybe trade with you. But any of those 3 receivers, they, if they get to a point to where, you get a couple guys that are taken a little earlier, all it takes is one team to fall in love with Christian Watson. And I don't see that happening in the top 20. I guess we'll see. But I think Wilson's going to go early. And I think there's a possibility Burks goes earlier than people think, because I think NFL teams talk themselves out of that testing mattering that much. And his film's decent. Not decent. He's got good film. I see the quickness issues. Yeah. Some team's going to talk themselves into saying, he doesn't need to be quick. And
there's 5 or 6 snaps a game that he just decides I ain't doing this. And it drives me nuts.
Yeah. Where he's like, yeah. But you know what? You're going to see some team, because there's a few snaps per game where he just says, I think I'm going to take this ball. I'm going to run it to that end zone. And literally nothing you do is going to matter. Those guys matter. That's hard to find. Yep, guys that can just start little brothering everyone out there. So there are scenarios where one of those guys, not all 3, maybe not even 2, but one of those guys could fall into the very late teens or early 20s. If that happens and I were the Chiefs, I'd make a phone call and say, hey, yeah, I know some other teams offering, but we've got that extra 3rd rounder is really nice because you can trade it, and that's very valuable. That's a really valuable trade commodity to move up, because you can say, yeah, we'll give you a 3rd and a 7th. That's 7th. Again, that's just making the sentence longer. It means very little else. And so you can do that. Any one of those 3 guys. Would you trade up for anyone at the receiver position?
I am more likely, knowing who I am, to go up for an edge.
Sure.
I don't think there's a top 10 wide receiver in this class. That's how I feel. When you look at the last 2 classes in particular, Jameson Williams was my number 1 before he got hurt. He's my number 2 now. Garrett Wilson is my number 1. Neither of them would have been in the top 3 in the Jamar class, right? Let's keep things relative. Whereas I think Hutch is a floor player. I think Thibodeau is a floor player, and I think Trayvon Walker is a ceiling player.
A safety disguised as a giant.
Right. They
He ran
could
a 4.51.
Dude, just go look at his 3-cone. Yeah, at 275.
Good Lord.
Yeah, he ran it faster. He ran 2/100 slower than Von Miller at 22 pounds heavier. Yeah,
And he's an incredible athlete.
Yeah.
That Georgia was like, you know what we ought to do? We ought to make this guy a run stuffer. It's like, now to be fair,
just
who am
stay
I to
here.
criticize? Their defense was incredible. So what do I know?
That's a problem. You had too many mouths to feed. Like they blitz every other 5 seconds, so it's like you got to have some guys stay put so they don't kill each other.
Yeah, our linebackers are going to get the stats. They made a decision, and again, that scheme. I mean, you need the athletes to pull it off. Georgia had them.
Absolutely.
But so I'm curious. I'm happy you brought up edge because I don't think I'm going to have time to do like a know your draft crush on multiple dudes. And so I might. I mean, I'm looking at Dane's list right now. Which forgive me. Right now, I'm looking at Dane's list because they all have the names mashed together very closely. And there are a lot of names here. I mean, Crud, you get 9 deep, and he still got them graded as a second-round prospect. And so I'm curious.
Yeah.
Who would you trade up for, and for where? Because I mean, who's kind of some of your guys?
I will tell you my guys. I would trade up to. I wouldn't go above 9 because just out of the cost and the fact that, like you said, there's enough depth in the second round that I can be happy, especially because I know that I'm picking for a Spags defense. Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. I would trade up for Walker to 10. That's as far as I would go. I wouldn't trade up for Hutchinson or Thibodeau.
You wouldn't or would?
I would not, because you got to go up into the top 5.
So what if all this talk about Walker is true, where he goes, and Hutch and Walker both go top 5, and Thibodeau inexplicably falls to 10? Would you trade up for him?
Probably not.
Really?
I don't trust it. I don't trust his motor. Not for a top 10 pick. He gets to 13 and I'm all over it with the Texans. He gets to 15, I'm all over it with the Eagles. The problem is I would probably do just about the same thing being the Eagles pick at 15 for Jermaine Johnson.
Oh, do you like Jermaine Johnson?
Not particularly. He's not like, oh, I got to have that guy, because he doesn't necessarily fit Spag's system. Like, he can play in it, but he's not a power edge. The guy that I really like is Cam Thomas, who should be available in the second round, is a power size guy that actually ran his 3-cone faster than Trayvon Walker.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So he's surprisingly athletic for a big dude.
Yes. He's not as explosive straight line as George Karlaftis, but Karlaftis cannot move laterally to save his tail. So I have Karlaftis as a second-round pick below Thomas. That's where Dane and I diverge. I like Mafe as well.
Sure. Yeah, he's got
a
Thomas
gamble
way down there.
Yeah, he does not like him. He's got him deep in the 3rd. I have Mafe down with the Jabo as second-round guys because neither of them are polished, even if they are healthy. Drake Jackson, Myjai Sanders, Ebiketie, those are all later, right on the edge of 2nd, 3rd. Nick Benito as well, but Benito, in my opinion, has to be either a designated pass rusher or be in a 3-4.
Sure, he's a little light.
I'm really high on D'Angelo Malone as a speed rusher, like as a change of pace rusher. He is not ready to play on 1st and 2nd down in the NFL, but I like him. I'm a wholehearted supporter. In fact, I should have made a shirt for the draft show. Folks, you can watch it on the stream, but I'm a full proponent of the Zappy, Stearns, and Malone law firm of Western Kentucky. And they are all underdogs, and I think they all have something to bring to the table that will net their team's value.
I do like underdogs. So I'm curious. So are you not quite as high on this edge class then overall as some people are?
Correct.
Oh.
There's a drop after 4, and after 7, there's a significant drop, in my opinion.
That's tough. Well, that's the real problem when you're trying to determine, what you want to do necessarily, because edge rushers, there could be 7 of them gone by the time you get to 29, 30.
Yeah.
It's a similar problem with wide receiver. It's a similar problem somewhat to corner, although corner is weird in the draft. And I think that's because it's so hard to project what corners do at the next level. that's one problem with having need at edge rusher and at receiver, and to a lesser extent, but still there at corner. Guys that are good prospects. Like if you need a center, you can get a great prospect in the second round.
Sure.
You need a tight end, you can get a really, really good prospect in the second round. Edge and wide receiver, not so much.
I disagree. I actually think wide receivers deep all the way to the mid-third, probably into the 70s.
Ooh.
I think you can get guys that can walk in and contribute to your offense.
So you don't view this draft as top heavy, but you like the later rounds in it.
Not even that. I like the mid rounds. I like those guys between 40 and 75. I think there's a lot of guys that are good that aren't great, and I don't think it's top heavy. I don't think the wide receiver should be in the top 10.
Sure. And then you'll see something driven up for need. So here's what I'm curious about. So then and I know we got to get to the super chats, but I mean, is it a legitimate tactic then to, rather than, even grabbing a guy in the first round, grab two edges, 28, 29, and 30, grab an edge in a corner, and then with both your second round picks, I don't know, grab Sky Moore and Christian Watson.
Yeah, I think you trade up with 29 and one of the fourths, maybe one of the thirds, and you trade back from 30 and you get edge, corner, wide receiver in those top three.
I could see that. Which, by the way, if anyone is watching this, if you have Sky Moore film, I will rise up.
Please.
Yeah. No, it's nowhere. It's not even like game by game snaps. There's like one game. And so I might not be able to fulfill my promise to review him. If the Chiefs draft him, then I'll figure something out.
We'll pay
There's
someone
a few
something.
doors that I haven't knocked on yet that I probably could, because I don't like calling in favors. But
yeah, I don't. Yeah.
And so, but I mean, because Sky Moore, the limited stuff I've seen from him, he looks like he gets really nice releases, runs good routes, looks explosive, catches the ball well. But I've seen so little that I just don't know.
What little I saw was like a 360 res video that he did all those things. Not greatest against contact. He gets ridden off of his route a lot.
Matt Harmon likes him.
Yeah, and listen to Matt Harmon. You guys should.
Yeah.
There's just some of those things. He's not the physical player that Tyreek is in terms of being able to maintain his route despite contact. That's one of the things, if you're going to be undersized, that I need you to do. That's one of the reasons that I love Jarrett Stearns in the 7th, or maybe as a PFA, because you can't knock him off his route. He's Steve Smith in that regard. So I love that kid.
Being able to run through contact, it's an underrated trait. That's one reason why, when people talk about, say, for an example, like Drake London being unable to separate, to an extent, and you and I have talked about this ad nauseum. He can separate better than people think. It's not Jonathan Baldwin, but he also just runs right through contact. Like, if you're a corner and you're going to make contact with him, there's a good chance that it's going to affect you more than it's going to affect him. It's kind of similar. There's a few guys. Burks is the same way. So that's one way. I mean, that's how he wins. Almost did too much with him, where it's like, okay, dude, you can't just like chuck the guy aside open. You got to be a little more subtle about this.
They hold that way. You might as well chuck them.
Yeah,
it is college.
That's true. That's true. I'm actually looking at your boy next. Not your boy, but I mean your guy that you've referenced, Calvin Austin. I'm looking at him, and then your actual boy, Garrett Wilson. They're next on my list. Hopefully tomorrow we'll see. I don't know the date.
I look forward to your either confirmation or complete ridicule of my opinion. So
that's what this time of year is for.
I just rewatched Calvin Austin just the other day too. See what if you get it, take a look at the Houston film. That's the one that really stood out to me as, oh, there is more to him than I thought. I was wrong.
Yeah, he can really move. I mean,
and through contact.
Right.
That was the big thing for me.
He weaponizes it well, because that's not easy to do. That's something Mecole Hardman struggles with, is moving through contact.
Right.
And not everyone can do that. It's not just a matter of strength, because, then almost no little guys could do it. There is some functional strength there, but it's also, there's an amount of bend that just, almost fluidity and flexibility. Like think Jamal Charles running through contact where he would just shrug it off, being able to kind of dip your shoulder into it a little bit. That matters.
Yeah.
And
Makes
that's
a big difference.
Yeah. So now we'll see. I can't get a handle on this draft so far. And I'm like getting twitchy about it. It's just like, maybe that's why I want them to trade for a veteran. It's like, oh, thank God, a known commodity. I can review his all 22 and we'll just figure it out.
Yeah. I've watched over 200 prospects so far this year. Twitchy is exactly the word for it, dude. It's crazy. Yeah, it's good. And it's funny because I'm tired. Folks, we're going to get to your super chats. Make sure that you go back, though. And if you are not subbed yet, go sub to Seth first. Please do. And then come over and sub to the new one. That's NFL33.com. That takes awesome. You to the Substack. I cheated because I can't remember long addresses. I'm terrible. And that's okay. It's going to be fine. So let's get to your questions. Jeremy had a good one. Do y'all feel like the way the players are today, that the fifth year option is obsolete or irrelevant? I don't. I think that that's crucially important, to tell you the truth. More so as teams have to take more risks on quarterbacks, because that pays you off a little bit. And that's honestly what I think is going to drive the Chief out of 30 and get good trade value. Dude, what do you think of the fifth year option?
I think it still has a ton of value. I mean, you're going to see with like superstar players, you're going to see some problems, but there's a ton of value for good players. There's a ton of value for very good players. And even with superstars, yes, superstars are going to get paid superstar money regardless, but that extra leverage does matter. That's just, you're still probably going to pay them after year 3, but it moves the needle in negotiations to an extent, and it gives you more options. If you, like you said, I mean, if down the road you got to trade them, if something happens, that fifth year option makes them more valuable as a, I hate using this phrase because they're humans, but as a commodity, that's how that works. Players have a certain amount of value in the open market. Having a fifth year option attached to them raises that value. So I do think it still matters quite a bit. Maybe a little bit less as players in the new era are discovering that the squeaky wheel gets the oil a little more often in the modern NFL than 5 to 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's completely fair. Teddy, thank you for the super chat. Let's get straight to it. 30, 62, and McCole for Debo. Do we have an offer? Do we offer it or do they take it? A, I don't think they offer it, and B, I think they would consider it.
I think they'd consider it. I think McCole Hardman would be a really interesting fit in Kyle Shanahan's offense. He obviously can't run the ball between the tackles the way that Debo can, but as like a jet sweep and draw weapon, honestly, I think McCole Hardman can do some really awesome stuff there because he's, explosive. And he actually picks his way through stuff pretty well.
Yeah.
Better than you might think. I would not 30 and 62 and McCole. What that means is you've traded Tyreek Hill, McCole Hardman, and you've traded Tyreek Hill and McCole Hardman for Debo, 2 4th-rounders and a 6th round, or 2 6th-rounders and a 4th-rounder. And that doesn't make sense because I wouldn't trade Hardman. I wouldn't trade McCole Hardman for a 4th-rounder and 2 6th-rounders.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. Agreed. James, thank you, Teddy. Appreciate you as always and the support. If Drake London falls past 20, would you trade up to get him, James Davis?
Yes.
I would be targeting Bill at the 21 pick for the Patriots. That's who I would call. Because that he wants to move out. If he takes a wide receiver, it's going to blow up in his face. So he's got to get out of there.
Yeah, that is one thing Bill Belichick cannot do is draft wide receivers.
Right.
Man, he does a lot of things really well, but if London got to 20, that would be like, you call Bill and be like, hey, we'll give you 30 or they'd probably have to do 29. I mean, who knows? But you offer them that and maybe that extra 3rd rounder, and I think that could get you there.
I think so too. My question to you is, do you think that for Andy in particular, I think Patrick is comfortable with it, But for Andy, is the YOLO 50-50 ball something that could come into this offense with any regularity?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think you saw Terrell Owens win more that way. But I mean, now Andy Reid's offense has come a long ways.
True.
But I also think you're going to see a return to a little more of his roots this year. Just in terms of adapting, with the ebbs and flows of the league. And I also think, again, Drake London separates just enough. He wins enough on those slants and ins and some of those comeback routes that he can run a decent tree enough to make it work. And so I don't think you're like sacrificing for him the way you would if it were a guy who can't separate at all. That's like if Burks could separate the way London can, I'd still like London better because London is better at what Burks does best. London's incredible at it, but Burks just doesn't separate the same way. At least I don't see it.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. There are times, unfortunately, that it doesn't separate at all.
Right.
And I think people forget those reps.
Yes.
So, Ross, thank you. Is it with the possible wide receiver being traded, could the Chiefs be in prime place to take the top wide receiver in the draft? If it falls the way that it will be on my board, Jameson Williams will probably be the only guy that I could see anybody trading up into the top 10 for. So if that's the top, it's really iffy to me still, but it is a possibility.
Yeah, I think you're gonna see guys go earlier. I mean, wide receiver right now with the current market, I think teams are going to be. I think drafting wide receiver is going to become more and more of a premium thing. I think teams are going to do it wrong though. In a lot of ways, I think teams are going to say, "Well, that means we've got to take one in the first round multiple times, like the old Detroit Lions." My thing would be, maybe this means you just need to take at least a wide receiver in the top 3 every year.
Yeah.
In the top 3 rounds. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the first round every year, but wide receivers, those contracts are getting crazy. Although, again, we'll see what happens. We talked about this last week. The Chiefs the Chiefs and the Packers, they're interesting litmus tests. If the offenses are still really good, you might see some pushback for those massive wide receiver contracts. Let's say Tua doesn't start to light the world on fire with Tyreek Hill. Let's say Hill goes to Miami and he has – what if Hill goes to Miami and he has 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns?
Yeah.
Super respectable season.
But not Tyreek Hill caliber.
Yes. And now Adams, I think Adams has a better chance of putting up huge numbers with Carr.
I do too.
Because I think Carr's a better quarterback than Tua.
Agreed.
And so –
and that chemistry's there. That goes a long way.
Well, yeah, and he can just win in a specific way that goes along with Carr just being kind of a YOLO quarterback occasionally. Hill can do it to an extent, but Hill and Tua is a weird combination. But let's say Adams does really well and Hill does good but not great. Hill's too good to not do well. Yeah. Like he's not going to, have a 700-yard season.
Right.
Like barring injury. But it'll be interesting to see how the NFL adjusts. Like let's say in some miracle Christian Kirk doesn't turn around the Jaguars offense. Let's say, some of these new receivers, let's say Hill kind of works out but not really. Let's say Adams moves the needle but the offense isn't that much better than it was last year. I wonder if next year you're going to have GM saying, "Wait a minute, why would I pay, 80% of quarterback money for not remotely 80% of the impact?"
Right.
When I can draft you, and receivers are getting better and better coming out.
And that's where analytics come in, folks. That's how you derive value. We're going to talk about that a lot this year. Chris, thank you. I think we got this one already. I just wanted to repeat it one more time. 30-62, send to the Eagles for the 15th plus a 4th rounder. That's the prime target for me is trading with the Eagles. I don't know that I'd send 62. I'd try 30 and 94 is what I would try, but that's me.
Man, if you could get up from 30 to 15 for 1 second rounder, that'd be tempting because your options become much greater in terms of who you can grab.
Absolutely. And then you might even be able to turn it around if you don't get your guy and flip it back and actually end up with more picks in the top 100.
Sure.
Terry, what would you think of a trade? Who do you think we will trade before the draft? I don't think they do.
I'm becoming more convinced that they're not going to trade for anyone. Nate seems really skeptical that they will.
Yeah, I don't think so either. There's too much racked up value right now. So, Hydra, thank you very much. Correct me if I'm wrong. I might be wrong. Casey met with Pickens twice, draft and the top 30, as opposed to only once with other receivers. Is that significant?
Could be.
Sometimes the only significance is you didn't like the guy's answers at first, and you wanted to give him a chance to answer him again. Because there's guys that have been picked by this team that said, I'd never talked to him at my pro day. I didn't come in for a visit. I didn't know they even liked me. So, I don't know that it equates for the Chiefs as much as it does for other teams.
Right. I think there is a chance that there's some we're not sure about this. Let's see, because we kind of like this guy's tape. I like Pickens for Kansas City, at least film-wise. And that's partly because, people talk about deep threat, explosion, that kind of stuff. He's technically very, very good.
Sound.
Yeah, he's very sound technically, and he's quicker than a guy his size normally is. And so he pairs it well. He gets open quite a bit. He separates pretty well, really well, actually. And I can see that kind of raising his floor in the offense to where you've got a guy that I think might have the skill set for a wide receiver one, but you still have that floor that's not cratering out.
I have injury concerns, and I have problems that if you come back from that injury and you swear up and down you're 100% healthy and you get 9 targets and you don't do a ton with them, I have some problems with that.
Sure.
So it's more risk for me. That's why I have him in the second round. I still love the fit. I just can't take him before 50 is my problem.
Yeah, injury concerns matter.
Yeah, that's just me, folks. Bill, thank you. Hypothetically, how much to get Chase Young and Terry McLaurin? Everyone?
I mean, both firsts and both seconds would probably do it.
Maybe. If I'm Washington, I wouldn't give up both those guys. One or the other, maybe, but I wouldn't give them both up.
Yeah, you basically, if you're Washington, because they don't have their quarterback situation figured out.
Right.
And the only reason you would do something that drastic is if you say, look, both these guys are getting another year older, another year closer to their big contracts. We don't have a quarterback. We want 2023, a much stronger quarterback year, to be the year we go all in. So we're going to tank. Then, you offer both them. You call a team like Kansas City, hey, give us both your first, both your seconds, and a third rounder, fourth rounder next year, and then go into next year with draft capital like no one's ever seen. Sure, but they're not going to do that.
I don't think so.
They got other stuff going on there.
Yeah, that's our thought, Bill. Thomas, how are you? Who will have the better year, Juju, MVS, or Hardman? Hardman. I believe he believes it's Hardman. My money's on Juju.
Me too. I think Juju, he's been consistently a better receiver than either of the other two. His skill set, while it is a little bit niche, it's not quite as niche as people are making it out to be at this point. He was considered a deep threat his first couple of years in the league. Right. And I don't know if I'm going to really judge him that much to the fact that Pittsburgh, had a guy that couldn't throw the ball down the field. Well, yeah, but Seth, what about Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool? Yes, they had those two guys, and then they never sent Juju down the field. Because Claypool and Johnson are not intermediate and shallow route runners.
Right.
So they never sent him deep anymore. So I think Juju has a more varied skill set, and we'll see, but I think he has the better year. I think one of the reasons Juju signed in Kansas City is because he thinks he's got a superstar season left in him to get. Well, what is he, 25, 24?
Not even, I think he's 24. Yeah. Do you believe it's worth the risk of taking Adam Anderson as one of the sevenths if allegations are true? Are true? Obviously not. Talent-wise, he's a top 100 pick. Yes, it is all about the background investigation of whether he actually did these things. And so he would have to be 100% cleared for me. But yes, easily one of those day 3 picks. I could, if he's 100% cleared, take him in the 4th. I don't care. That's still great value. So Seth's madly looking up Adam Anderson and what he did, or what he's accused of doing. So it's a tall order to get cleared from that kind of thing.
Yes.
Chase, thank you for the support. Seth, we'll move on. Williams is their plan A. If they can't get him, I think they trade for one of those unhappy wide receivers. Good point, Chase. I like that. So come back after the draft and be like, so you really don't want to be there, huh?
Or even
now I'll give you a fourth.
You know, teams, you want to know when teams love the draft the most? It's not the week leading up to draft. It's during the draft. Can you imagine, you are the Niners or the Titans. I don't think the Titans would trade A.J. Brown to the Chiefs. I don't. I think they view themselves as contenders still, which, okay. But, which, you know what? They had a really good run last year for a while. So I think they view themselves as contenders. And I think they also would have visions of A.J. Brown going for what? 250 on them in the divisional round or the AFC Championship. And I think he would.
Yeah.
And so I just don't think you're going to see it from a team that thinks that they're a contender. What Baltimore did with Orlando Brown last year was super weird. And I'm not sure if they would do it again. Maybe they would, but I'm not sure they would. But imagine you're like the Seahawks. Chiefs, you've used your first round pick. You're done. Bored. You could pick another player. All you have to do is say yes. Here's pick number. We just picked at 29. The Seahawks are bummed. Hey, there's a player you really like still on the board who probably won't be there in the next pick. Here's pick 30. We'll just do one pick. Because that, again, like we talked about earlier, it's the cost benefit type thing. Would I trade Tyreek Hill for DK Metcalf and a second rounder and a fourth rounder and 2 6-rounders? Maybe.
Yeah. You just never know.
Yeah.
All right, folks, we're going to speed through these. Thank you, Chase. Appreciate you for the support. Chiefs fan 58. Any chance? What about OT? Any chance we go for right tackle? I absolutely think that they have to, just not until the third or the fourth.
Yeah. I don't see them moving up for one until you reach that point of the draft where maybe, they move up from, late in the third to early in the third, something like that.
I will say this, though. If Cross falls to 15, I'm calling the Eagles. I think he's got that kind of athleticism. So, yeah. I don't think Cross is going to fall that far, but that's
you will not rest until we bring this team back to the 80s.
Yes. Hello. Do you remember Christian Okoye? Yes. I want to revive that whole concept. Chris, thank you as always. And thanks for joining the new Substack. Appreciate you, Chris. After Dan's stream today, I'm all in on Tyndall. Seth, do you like him? I know he's one of Ryan's guys. Where's the best spot for him to draft him? Have you seen Tyndall yet?
I have not seen Tyndall yet. Is he one of your guys?
Yeah, he's a Mack truck, man. With a Ferrari underneath. It's awesome. He just can't turn and cover.
That feels important.
No, I love the guy. As a Sam, as a hangover rusher. Go back and watch the championship game. He blew a pass assignment. Nakobe Dean gets in his face. Next thing you know, he is a missile taking out Bryce Young 19 yards down the field when Young has plenty of space around to maneuver, and he just zoned in him and got him. It was awesome. But he is a face first downhill player.
Yeah. And I think they got one of those at linebacker already.
Yeah, but hey, I'll take 2. You can rotate them. It's fine. It's fine. So next year, Chris, we'll get Seth to watch some defensive tape. It'll be great.
Oh.
David, thank you for the super sticker. We appreciate you. I'm an old timer, been around here a long time, and I appreciate your being back. Frey, Seth, I read your Pickens article. I know Ryan isn't very high on him. It's not that I'm not high on him. I just refuse to put a first round grade on him because of the question marks.
Sure. And I think it's worth noting that I think if Pickens' tape was exactly what it is and his testing was exactly what it is, it might be a little bit different. But there's some concerns with regards to the injury. And it's a different situation than Williams, whom you haven't seen come back and look less explosive.
Right. Brandon, thank you. What about Garrett Wilson? He's my wide receiver 1. I think he can walk into any offense in this league and be productive as a rookie. And that's what it comes down to for me. Other guys have more explosion. Other guys have better foot speed, catch radius. He's got a little bit of everything. And I think he can be an all-around pro. He was number 2 until Jameson Williams got hurt, and Jameson fell below him just because of the injury recovery. So
Mhm.
Have you changed your? You haven't watched Wilson yet at all. Have
I've
you
watched
started
a couple
even?
games of him. I see why you like him. I'm not quite as high on him as you are. I think he does a lot of things well. I don't see,
Mhm.
although I mean his ability at the top of routes to cut and maintain momentum is really high level. And that's one of those weird niche traits that translates really well to the next level. So I can see that.
Yeah.
And there's nothing he does poorly. And that's a big deal.
Right. He's just not a dominator in any one way.
Right. And that's like weird, like Olave, like you see like just that ridiculous route running and feel. Wilson's got some of that. Explosion that Jameson Williams has. He's got some of that. Ball skills that Drake London has. He has some of that. And so it's hard for me to see him as a high level wide receiver. That said, he's probably likely to be a good receiver more so than some of these other guys who have some weaknesses that drag them back that Wilson doesn't have. Well, now I don't need to write about Wilson. I gave it all away.
There you go. Well done. Less time. Folks, we're going to wrap these up. I'm going to go through them quick fire here because I'm out of time. I got to get a kid to a place with his stuff. With the focus on the wide receiver class, especially for KC, would drafting at any other position around would surprise you? No. Edge or corner are certainly within play, and I think, Seth, you agree with that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Julian, how much would it cost for a trade up to the 19 to 22 range? Thoughts of drafting Calvin Austin and Pickens and signing Stearns UDFA? I don't think Calvin Austin's going to go anywhere near the first round, Julian. So I think you can wait on him until the third. I think Pickens will probably be a second tier fringe first. So if you need to go up to 19 to 20, I think you can get that done for a second, of course, but I'd try to do it for a third.
Yep.
I'm cheap. Steven, think OBJ going the Giants, Cleveland, LA, QB matters more than wide receiver. Than wide receiver does to quarterback. Absolutely.
For sure.
And I'll tell you this too. I hope they talk to him in late September when no one signed him yet, and you can bring him back into December. That's what I would do. Why are we focused on wide receiver? Isn't our our weak spot? I would like us to focus on DE and CB. It's in there, but you can't overreach for them. If the wide receiver that's available to you is better than the edges and the corners, you got to take him.
Mm-hmm.
That's how franchises dig themselves holes. So
right.
It really is about the availability.
Yep. And the Chiefs are specifically built to win with their offense. They need the defense to not make them lose. And that's just a fact about the Chiefs.
Yeah. Yeah. That's Andy's MO. I think we move back 5 to 9 spots out of 30. I agree. Stay in that 30 range. I think you can get something done. Pick up another pick too. Kayla, thank you for the support. Giants fan, how integral was Mike Kafka to the development of Patrick Mahomes? Can he turn Daniel around? Seth?
It depends on, I mean, look, if you believe the things that Patrick Mahomes says about him, he was not all important, but wildly important. How about this? I haven't talked to anyone who knows anything about the team that doesn't have really, really, really good things to say about Mike Kafka. Now, Andy Reid sings the praises of all his assistants, but everyone that I've talked to is like, yeah, that dude was the next OC, and he thinks he's a head coach in waiting. Like that's been the thing with Mike Kafka for a few years. If it weren't for some of the weirdness that surrounded Bieniemy's hiring, Kafka would have been an offensive coordinator 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And so,
agreed.
So I mean, I can't say how for sure it is. But he was really important to it. And my understanding is that he's just incredibly bright, knows how to get the best out of quarterbacks. If he can't turn Jones around, and I think Jones has some talent, I don't think Jones can be turned around if Kafka can't do it.
I was just going to say, I don't think Jones is salvageable. That's just my opinion. But Kayla, I hope that helps you.
Yeah.
That's going to wrap it for us, folks.
Yeah. A lot of mental damage.
Go ahead.
A few years was all I was going to say.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Darnold the same way. I thought he would rebound, but no, I just don't think it's going to. That'll wrap it for us tonight, folks. Make sure you check the Substack for Seth at Minnesota Chiefs fan at Substack.com. Make sure you check mine at NFL33.com. And grab yourself the all-important draft guide. You need that over at RogueAPC.com and use that code RGR22AM. That's all the appointments for today, Seth. I'm looking forward. We're not going to be together next Thursday because we're all going to be watching the draft. But we'll be back in 2 weeks, and we'll follow up with your impressions right after that, and I'm looking forward to it.
It's going to be awesome.
I think so. Oh, all right. Folks, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you, all you super chatters and everybody enjoying the other content. Check out Seth's, check out ours. We'll talk to you next week. I will be remote Monday. No, I'll be here Monday night. That's what it'll be. So, good night from Minnesota and from Colorado. We'll talk to you later.